Here we are, and we're back for another time of working on the Landell Flute tune-up manual. This is lecture number 2. I don't know how many it will be, probably not too many more. So last time we got the flute all taken apart and took out a couple of dents and made the flute ready for cleaning and buffing. Now, as this is not going to be a COA, this flute is going to be an overhaul, but that's why I took out all the pads, you see. Right now I'm going to treat this as a example of what we do with the flute tune-up. So just imagine that the pads are still in there. It's not going to make any difference. We saw how to take the flute apart, and we saw how to take the pins out, and we'll talk about reassembly in the future. But at this time I will usually polish the flute by hand, since as a COA, clean, oil, and adjust, it's not necessary, and it's too expensive, time consuming to take it in and polish it with the buffing machine. That's only necessary, for example, where I used the number 6 draw file in this area to take care of some of the ripples that were left after I took out the dents. So before I finish this flute, I'll do that polishing in that area, and maybe touch up a couple other places where I had to use my burnisher. The burnisher does leave very fine marks, but they're not really scratches. This is a very important and heavy-duty tool for taking care of dents and all sorts of flaws, and it's hardened so it doesn't get scratched. So since this is sterling silver flute, it does tarnish, and that tarnish is a black color. It's a dark color, and the easiest and best way I found to get rid of it is to give this flute a bath in a Pyrex casserole dish, which is about 10 by 15 by 2. And that casserole dish I put on a warming tray. It's an electric tray that keeps it, probably up to around 90 or 100 degrees at the most, just so you get some heat to the solution. Now, what's in the tray is baking soda. About a scoop, about a whole tablespoon or more of baking soda. And I also line the inside of the tray with aluminum foil. So there's a chemical reaction that goes on between the silver, actually the silver oxide, and the aluminum. And the baking powder is the thing that makes it go, makes it happen. Baking powder has a lot of uses, many different things. Well, this is an ordinary silver polishing cloth. The fact that they get dark doesn't make them any less effective. They work just fine when they get dark. They just get your hands a little dark. I always work with these plastic trays. This is a Rubbermaid product. It's called a drawer organizer. So if you have a drawer full of all variety of things, then you can separate them into their appropriate size spaces, and makes them easier to find. Now, if you have a bench pin, you should set one up on your bench so you can do this. Rub vigorously on the body of the flute to bring it up to a higher luster. some of the black Sharpie marks are still there, so I'll take those off with acetone. You hear the music? That's a Bach Brandenburg Concerto Number 2 for 2 recorders. But here most of the time you hear it today performed on 2 flutes and orchestra. But the violin is a much more prominent soloist in this piece. He's got the real work to do. But it's difficult on recorder too. I played this piece several times. Such a happy piece. I'm going to go through this polishing right in front of you today, so you will see how the best way to do this is. It's not difficult. Once you've done it a few times, it's really easy. But you know, the customers love it. The customers love it when they see their flute come back and it's so clean and that those black marks are gone. That really makes their day, I tell you. I think that's probably the biggest thing that we sell when we do an overhaul is a polished flute. So to get underneath these springs, you can use a strap of polishing cloth, slide it under the springs, and use it like, you know, a shoe shining operation. And that'll get right down into the nitty-gritty. The areas that get most tarnished are the areas that you cannot touch with your hands. So those are the places that really need the most attention. You get rid of that ugly dark shade of silver. Why did we start playing the flute in the first place? Why? Because it's beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful instrument. Nothing like it. I can still remember the first day I opened my first flute case. I was just so enthralled with how beautiful it is. I think it was a Bundy. Good student flutes. They're pretty indestructible. Now I'm going to bring this a little closer so you can see what it looks like. Much better. I use a thumbnail to get into these rings. Right up close to the ribs. my thumbnail right up close to the ribs. So you see I'm getting rid of the black lines in these rings. Okay, now there's one more part that needs cleaning, and that's why we have pipe cleaners and acetone. Go through the posts with the pipe cleaners, because this thing's been in the water, and with the cleaning agent we want to get rid of all that stuff. Where there's a thread, you can twist it into the hole. And you see it come out the other side, you've done it. I don't know if you can really see that come up to a nice shine on this video. Now, speaking of tarnish, I make flutes with a new alloy. The alloy of sterling silver called argentium silver. There, now I can see you. Argentium silver. It will not tarnish. It's more expensive than sterling. The alloy has a very, very small amount of germanium in the alloy. So in order for us to call it sterling silver, it has to have 92.5% fine pure silver. But there's another 7.5% that's not silver. And so in sterling silver, usually there's some copper there and whatnot. And a guy in England who is a silversmith, his name's Peter Johns, and I've met him. He discovered that by putting a little bit of germanium in that extra part of the alloy, which isn't silver, that it has this amazing property. It does not tarnish. So the funny thing is, now I've been making that flute for many years now, probably 15 years or so. Invested a lot of money to get all the materials I need and started from scratch, made all the parts. There's 100 parts and different parts in a flute. That's a lot of work. And so far I think I've only sold one or two of them. So I'm afraid flutists have always been this way. They're very reluctant to look at anything new. If you say the word new to most flutists, they'll just turn around and go away. after they look at it once. They might say, oh, good, fine, good, congratulations. But they don't buy it. And Theobald Bohm learned that when he made the first metal flute in silver, and all the flutists had been playing for many centuries before that was wood. So when people started hearing the wooden flute, it just sounded very crass and loud and ugly to them. It took a very long time before the common everyday flute player thought about buying a metal flute instead of a wooden one. And so now after 150, going on 200 years, we have people making wooden flutes again. So we can choose what we like from a lot of varieties of materials. Yeah, well, one of the other properties of argentium is that I can harden the parts after I've made them. I can harden them and just in a kitchen oven, 550 degrees, and the silver comes out incredibly hard, much harder than sterling silver. So it makes it possible for me to fabricate parts in soft condition easily and accurately that way. Because metal has memory, it always wants to go back to whatever condition and shape it was in before you started manipulating it with hammers and presses and whatnot. So I found I can fabricate my parts more easily in the soft condition. And making argentium soft is just a matter of heating it up till it's slightly glowing red and let it air cool. And now it's annealed. And that way, in that condition, I can easily form it into whatever I want, like a lip plate, for example, or cups and things that are made out of sheet metal. So I'm getting underneath the springs on this body. You know, it takes at least an hour or two to polish a flute by hand like this. But I think it's time well invested that makes people happy. Then they come back a year later and have you do it again. It's one of the things that as a repair person you need to drill into people because they don't think about it. It's only been a year since I had the flute cleaned. It's fine, it doesn't need it again. That's what they think, and besides it costs money and they don't have money because they don't play much or teach much or whatever they do. So when I do a COA, I always put a little sticker on the bottom of the case where they don't see it every day, but it's there. I put a little sticker on the bottom of it that says next recommended Landell Cleano and Adjust is, and I put the date, a year from then, so they have a reference to come back. And more people are doing that, which is good, because the flute needs that oil change just like your car does. The engine's going to break down if it doesn't get clean oil every 3,000 miles. So too with a flute. So there's the body. Just go through the post. I'm just going to back this up for a minute. And there you can see what I'm doing. Hi. So you probably noticed my headgear. The up divisor, that's what this is. I'm going to move this up. Okay. This is an up divisor, and the lenses in here multiply by 2.5x. For young people, it's probably not all that important. You know, somebody in their 20s hardly really needs this, but before you get too old, 30s or 40s, the near vision gets harder and harder. So this is just about essential. I can't do anything without my up divisors on. Oh, and I have headlights on mine. Want to see? How about that? That helps too. The more light, the better. You know, if you don't do this, if you don't go through all the posts with the pipe cleaner, you're going to leave a little water inside these posts, and as soon as you put the flute together and leave that water in there, it's probably going to make the key rust. That water in there is dangerous. So you've really got to be very careful about making sure to get all the water out. And acetone is the best way to do that. Now this is probably the most important thing I have to say right now, today. I've got the keys that are pinned. Just all of them are pinned on their steel. And I'll make you bring it closer again. So here's the left-hand section, the B-flat key. With this one has 2 pins. The B-flat kicker has a pin, and this is the B-flat shake key, which has a pin, but it's usually the key is soldered to the steel, and this pin is ground off, and it never comes out. Don't ever take out. This is called a permanent pin, and there's 3 of them on the flute that are permanently pinned, and there's a reason for that. Here on the right hand section you have the double lug with 2 pins like there, and the F-sharp key, and that has a pin, and it's ground off nice and flush, both top and bottom, and it's soldered to the steel inside. So even if you could take out that pin, you'd have to heat this up with some flux and pull that apart. And they make it that way for a reason, so that if you did ever have to take this apart, let's say the because this steel got bent, and there's a way to straighten bent steels, and I'll show you that sometime. You have to have it apart. So just for repair purposes, they can put it back together again with the old pin, and then resolder it after you've done that work. So here's the trill section. The key up here, the key has the cup and the arm. That's soft soldered, and the pin is ground off flush, so it makes it very difficult to take it out. But on this end there's the pin, and where did it go? Oh no, it's missing. Oh rats. I hope it's not here on my bench. I'm gonna have to find it somehow. Oh, there it is. Okay, good. Okay, it didn't get lost. My lucky day. Alright. Can't pick it up. So, the important thing I have to tell you is, if you wash the flute like this, and this is how I polish the flute. When I go to the polishing machine, at the polisher, it's much easier to hold these small parts if they're pinned to the steel, because you see these small parts, you can hold it by the steel and it won't get lost. It won't fly away on you. So whenever we go to polish a flute, we have it in this configuration. The pinned keys are on the steel with the pin in the key, unlike this one here, which got lost for a minute. But then after you're done polishing, you've washed it in water with soap and water, and there's water inside these keys. So if you leave that together all night, you come back tomorrow, that whole thing is going to be rusty. Now I'm talking about older flutes, because around 1980s, flute makers finally got the point, and they started making their rods, they started making them out of stainless steel instead of the old alloy, which is called water hardening drill rod. And the reason for that is they didn't want the steel to ever rust. So stainless is exactly that. It will not rust. It's rust proof. It's also harder. It's sticky and miserable stuff to try to work with sometimes. So we can't make the pins the same way we used to. In these old flutes, the pins are made of needles, and the needles were made in packs, like 20 needles in a pack, and one of those needles you can turn into a reamer, and by making a reamer out of one of those pins, you can ream the hole after you've drilled it, and the pin will fit perfectly in the hole. The pin that comes from that pack of pins. But those needle reamers aren't hard enough to use in stainless steel. So in that case, if you're working on a flute that has stainless steels, you need to get another kind of a reamer, which is not this needle design thing. And they're, instead of being a parabolic shape, you know, that's what I'm making with 2 fingers. That shape is parabolic. It's a straight tapered, like that. The pin has straight sides instead of being parabolic. So that's the main difference. So before anything happens and I forget, I'm going to take those pins out and take the keys off. I didn't put them in real tight, so I have to find the right pair of pliers. So there are the 3 pinned keys sections. Now I'll go through each of these keys with the pipe cleaner and acetone, make sure they're clean and dry. Now, one of the reasons that they solder these 3 keys to the steel is because if they didn't do that, then the water would get in there and it would rust. So that's a preventative measure to, keep the darn thing from getting rusted on there so bad you'd never get it off. So can you see that? There's the lug with the 2 keys, two pins I mean. There's the B flat key and its pin, B flat kicker and its pin, rod, and there's the trill key, trill lever and its pin. So now I'll go through cleaning the rest of these keys and put them in place where they go. That's the E key. That's the F key. G key. There's the D key. A key. One more. Here's the long drill rod. So there's 2 more pieces of steel you need to be aware of. Don't leave the rollers on the foot joint keys overnight. Okay. If you're taking notes, make that in bold red letters. Don't leave the rollers together overnight, because there's water in there and that's going to rust. And tomorrow it's going to have a major fight to get it apart. And you see that pipe cleaner? That was nice and white before I started. So was my hand. But all that colored stuff on there is dark black. And that's what came out of the keys. I haven't even done them all yet. So, the crown on the Haynes flute and on many, many flutes, the crown is oh no, my battery. I better stop here.